Tonight we dive into a rain-soaked tale of pride, protest, and precipitation. You're standing at the edge of Edinburgh's old town, cobblestones slick with mist, the wind curling around your ankles like a ghost with cold fingers. The sky is, predictably, grey. A light drizzle kisses your face, just enough to be annoying but not enough for most Scots to bother with shelter. Then you notice it. One solitary figure holding something above their head. Not a hood, not a bonnet, but an umbrella. That person might as well be waving a red flag at a Highland bull. You see, in this curious slice of Scottish history, carrying an umbrella wasn't just frowned upon, it could spark outrage, scorn, or worse. What begins as a mundane weather accessory soon becomes a symbol of division, class, and rebellion. And somewhere along the way, the umbrella gets banned. Or does it? You probably won't survive this unless, of course, you have your brolly and a strong sense of sarcasm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. Let's see how far the rain clouds stretch tonight. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, rain clinging to your eyelashes. It's 1821. Edinburgh smells like coal, horses, and fish pies that have seen better days. The streets are crammed, the gutters overflowing, and there's a sense in the air, besides humidity, that something is brewing. Not tea. Tension. A man named Angus Macready strides up the Royal Mile, chin high, carrying, a tightly furled umbrella. He's not using it yet. He doesn't dare. He just wants people to see it. It's deep navy, with a brass-tipped handle that screams I own property and opinions. Naturally, someone throws a haggis at him. This is not just an isolated food-based assault. Angus is the tip of a very soggy iceberg. Across Scotland, a growing number of individuals are rejecting traditional rain-soaked suffering in favor of, brace yourself, staying dry. But in the early 19th century, this isn't just a personal choice. It's a political one. Back then, enduring the rain without complaint was seen as a sign of fortitude. To shield yourself with an umbrella, that smacked of softness, of Englishness, of urban dandyism. Or, as one pamphlet of the time put it, a frilly insult to Highland grit. Historians still argue whether the Scottish umbrella ban was ever official, whether any legal edict was truly passed. But what's beyond debate is the social enforcement. Men were mocked, women were scorned, and children who tried to shelter under parasols were told they'd grow up too delicate to swing a sword or birth a bairn. It didn't help that umbrellas were relatively new to the Scottish streets. They'd been around in Asia for centuries. Of course, China and Egypt both had early designs, mostly for sun protection. But Britain was slow to adopt them. The first real wave hit London in the late 1700s, thanks to a bold man named Jonas Hanway, who reportedly carried one through the streets despite being pelted with garbage and called a sissy. Fast forward to Scotland, where weather is both a lifestyle and a curse, and you'd think umbrellas would be welcome. Not quite. To carry an umbrella here in the early 1800s is to walk a tightrope between convenience and condemnation. Use it, and you're seen as either a weakling or a pretentious fool. Don't use it, and you'll probably get trench foot. Again. This strange social standoff peaks one particularly damp Tuesday, when a group of students from the University of Edinburgh stage a protest on Calton Hill. Their cause? The freedom to fold. They march with makeshift umbrellas made of sheep intestines stretched over broomsticks. It's horrifying. And mildly effective. By midnight, the newspapers are abuzz. The Scotsman runs a headline, "Youth in Rebellion, Raining Men and Nonsense." Local clergy call it heresy. Shopkeepers double their prices on umbrellas out of sheer panic. You pass a damp little alley where an old woman, possibly a witch, possibly just damp and grumpy, mutters, First the brollies, next the morals. She spits, but it's mostly rainwater. In pubs across the city, arguments break out. Not over politics, or football, or whiskey brands, but over umbrella etiquette. One well-documented bar fight in Leith results in 3 black eyes, 2 broken stools, and a very soggy sporran. The cause? A man dared open his umbrella indoors. Still, not everyone's against the trend. Some progressive thinkers see the umbrella as a tool of enlightenment, literally shielding the brain from dampness and allowing for drier, more elevated thoughts. There's even a pamphlet titled The Dry Mind, which argues that many of history's great ideas might have been born under cover. Of course, not all of them were. One inventor in Glasgow tries to create a hands-free umbrella hat. It's made of whalebone and terror. It collapses mid-use and knocks out 2 teeth. But back on the streets, you sense that something is shifting. The ridicule is still there, but it's starting to sound a little wetter, a little weaker. People are still mocking umbrellas, but maybe, just maybe, they're also a bit jealous. After all, even pride doesn't keep your socks dry. As the drizzle turns to a slow, soaking rain, you duck beneath the archway of St. Giles Cathedral and look out over the square. A man walks past, umbrella raised high, eyes forward. No shame. No apology. He disappears into the mist. And for the first time, you wonder just how far are people willing to go to fight for the right to stay dry. You follow the umbrella man. Not in a creepy way, more like an accidental drifting, as if your damp boots just naturally gravitate toward dry confidence. The mist thickens, blurring the edges of the stone buildings around you. The city feels like a waterlogged dream. And in this dream, umbrellas have become a symbol of something larger. That's what strikes you first. It's never just about the object. It's about what the object means. You catch up just in time to see him vanish into a tea house tucked into a corner off the grass market. The bell above the door jingles softly behind him, the sound almost too dainty for the war this city seems to be waging. You don't follow him inside. Instead, you turn and look out over the square. And there she is. Lady Isla McCrae. You'll hear her name more than once before this night is over. Her portrait eventually ends up in 2 museums, one satire play, and, controversially, a brand of shortbread. But right now, she's just a furious aristocrat standing on a crate, holding an umbrella like a sword. I refuse, she proclaims to the growing crowd, to let raindrops determine my dignity. She flicks open the umbrella with the kind of theatrical flourish usually reserved for opera or duels. It's tartan, naturally, with silver trim. Somewhere in the crowd, someone faints. Probably from shock. Or anemia. This is 1823, 2 years into the so-called Wet Rebellion, and Lady Isla's public performance is both declaration and defiance. She represents a new breed of aristocrat, part fashion icon, part social crusader, intent on normalizing umbrellas despite the grumblings of traditionalists and the loud opinions of men named Fergus. You may be wondering, why such passionate resistance? Here's the thing, Scotland isn't anti-innovation. It gave the world penicillin, the telephone, and Sean Connery. But what it doesn't tolerate well is change that smells of English smugness. And umbrellas, unfortunately, reek of it. The first brollies in Scotland weren't exactly subtle. Imported from London or Paris, they came with silk canopies, intricate handles shaped like animal heads, and the kind of price tags that said, "I don't work for a living." To many locals, these weren't rain shields, they were status sabers. Carried not to keep one dry, but to let everyone else know they couldn't afford to. And in a place where hardiness is practically a birthright, walking under a frilly parasol felt like a slap to the face of resilience. You didn't cope with the rain, you endured it, preferably while grumbling and wearing wool. Historians still argue whether this cultural clash came down to class, climate, or a collective superiority complex forged in centuries of Highland hardship. Some suggest that the real umbrella resistance was born in the smaller villages, where churchgoers were openly mocked for arriving at services with foreign head spiders. Others say it was a political movement in disguise, umbrella use as a silent protest against London-centric policies. But back in Edinburgh, the resistance is becoming more creative. Underground art collectives begin mocking anti-brolly laws with interpretive dance. One memorable performance features a man dressed as a storm cloud being defeated by a ballerina wielding a lace parasol. It doesn't win awards. It does get pelted with wet oatcakes. Meanwhile, Lady Isla isn't acting alone. She forms the Society for Precipitation Protection, a secretive group of nobles, students, and frustrated postal workers who meet monthly in rotating tea parlors. They share umbrella designs, resistance strategies, and occasionally biscuits shaped like thunderclouds. Not all efforts are successful. One society member, the ever-ambitious Malcolm Drummond, attempts to invent a retractable umbrella that fits in a pocket. What he ends up with is a small metal contraption that violently explodes open with the strength of a cannon. It breaks his nose and earns him the nickname Malcolm the Bloody. Still, innovations continue. Some start sewing umbrella fabric into their cloaks, creating wearable rain deflectors that confuse everyone, including horses. By late 1823, there's a noticeable shift. Fewer people throw food at umbrella carriers. Some even nod politely, as long as the umbrella in question is subdued in color and doesn't open until after the third toll of the church bell. But not everyone's happy. Enter Reverend Callum Ferguson, a stern, bristly-bearded man who claims umbrellas are the devil's awning. From his pulpit in Inverness, he rails weakly against these vanity tents and insists that rain is God's exfoliant. His sermons are oddly popular. People travel from as far as Aberdeen just to hear him say the phrase "sinners have sat in shelter." He also begins distributing flyers with titles like "Heaven hates hinges" and "Dryness is deceit." His most controversial message, however, is his claim that those who shield themselves from rain also shield themselves from divine judgment. Quirky? Yes. Fringe? Certainly. But not without influence. Some towns begin passing unofficial umbrella ordinances. In one parish, a tax is levied on anyone caught selling rain protection gear. In another, there's a rumored snitch reward for reporting umbrella users. This is how, somehow, a grandmother in Perth ends up on a watch list for owning a suspiciously ornate walking stick. But amid all this absurdity, a quieter resistance grows. Children begin drawing umbrellas in the margins of schoolbooks. Local poets write odes to the glory of dryness. And somewhere in a hidden cellar beneath Stirling Castle, an artist paints a fresco showing a soaked knight sheltering beneath a tartan canopy. It's titled "The Noble Dry." The lines are blurring. Where once the umbrella was a symbol of division, now it's become something else, a paradox. A soft rebellion. A quiet dignity. A soggy middle finger to the idea that suffering must be public to be authentic. And you, standing now in a courtyard as the rain tapers to a fine mist, start to wonder if the war is already lost or won and whether anyone noticed. Your boots are wet. Your hands are cold. But you glance up at a young boy tugging his mother's hand. He's holding something behind his back. It's a miniature umbrella. Bright red. Spotted with frogs. And he opens it. No one flinches. You're not sure if you're witnessing a revolution or just an unusually dry Tuesday, but either way, that little boy's frog-spotted umbrella feels like a crack in the sky. By now, umbrellas aren't merely tools, they've become characters in their own right. Scandalous, mysterious, sometimes heroic. And nowhere is that more clear than among the upper crust, where umbrellas are wielded less like shields and more like social scalpels. Welcome to the era of the dandy danger devices. In fashionable districts of Edinburgh and Glasgow, young aristocratic men, calling themselves the Dry Society, begin adopting umbrellas not just for rain, but as an essential piece of their ensemble. Picture velvet lapels, peacock feathers, and waxed mustache so sharp they could cut shortbread. And always, a bespoke umbrella. Each one is a statement. One member, Alistair Kilduff, commissions a retractable umbrella with a carved ivory handle shaped like his own face. Another, Percy MacDonnell, allegedly fills his umbrella's tip with a secret whiskey flask, though it leaks, ruining several courtship attempts. At garden parties and late-night salons, umbrellas are now discussed with the same gravity as fencing techniques or horse lineage. It's become a game of finesse, an accessory war waged in silk and irony. Of course, not everyone is playing. Outside the city centers, these displays are seen as mockery. Farmers mutter curses as they watch dandies twirl parasols on train platforms. One letter to the Scots Chronicle complains, "My cow has more dignity than a man who shelters from dew." Still, the appeal spreads. And with it, tension. You find yourself in a carriage now, bouncing along the rutted road toward Inverary, where a notable duel once took place, not over land, money, or love, but over an umbrella. It's 1825. Sir Cedric Balfour and Lord Hugh Dunnet, both card-carrying members of the Dry Society, get into a heated disagreement at the annual Whiskey and Walnut Ball. Cedric accuses Hugh of copying his umbrella's floral motif. Hugh denies it. A challenge is issued. At dawn the next morning, they meet in a fog-drenched field. The seconds pace it out. The rain begins to fall, softly at first, then steadily. Both men, per tradition, remove their coats. But neither removes their umbrella. The standoff becomes symbolic. Two umbrellas raised. Two men dripping with pride. Eventually, a butler trips and accidentally knocks both over with a tea tray, ending the duel before it begins. No injuries. Just wet egos. Historians still argue whether this duel ever actually happened. Some say it was fabricated by tabloid poets trying to sell pamphlets. But one thing's clear, by the mid-1820s, umbrella culture had fully invaded the upper class. Even artists get in on the trend. Scottish portraiture takes a wild turn. A painting of the Duchess of Montrose seated under a pale blue umbrella gets banned from the Royal Exhibition for being flagrantly unrelatable. Rumors swirl that the umbrella in the painting contains subtle political messaging in the lace pattern. Meanwhile, tailors are now offering brolly pockets, special compartments sewn into coats to house collapsible canopies. It's innovation meets indulgence. But underneath the parasol of all this pomp, a darker mood is forming. You feel it one afternoon in a small kirk north of Aberdeen. The sermon is less about salvation and more about dampness. Reverend Moira Campbell, a widow with a glare that could split wood, preaches a fiery lesson on resilience through rain. She points at the crowd. No saint ever needed a canopy. The Lord sends the storm so we may learn to walk through it, not to hide beneath it like frightened mice. There's scattered applause. And a cough from a lad in the back holding a suspiciously round walking stick. Outsiders don't know what to make of all this. French travelers report with confusion that the Scots argue about umbrellas as if they were canon. One Italian diplomat writes in his journal, "They fear softness more than swords." And it's true, umbrellas have come to symbolize weakness, a perceived betrayal of the famed Scottish grit. Yet, something strange is happening. Even critics begin owning umbrellas, but with qualifiers. Only for church, some say. Only when traveling abroad. Only when raining sideways and hailing actual rocks. These exceptions multiply. And soon, you're spotting umbrellas hidden beneath kilts, disguised as shepherd's crooks, and tucked into bagpipes with suspiciously hollow drones. But this is where things start to turn theatrical. In Glasgow, a rogue poet named Elspeth Kerr pens an anonymous tract titled The Brolly Manifesto, in which she argues that umbrellas are not symbols of cowardice, but of evolution. "Let the raindrops fall on those too stubborn to adapt," she writes. "We choose not to drown for pride. It's widely circulated, then widely mocked, then quietly adopted. Suddenly, everywhere you look, there's umbrella flair. Not open defiance, no, that would be too bold. But subtle, cheeky presence. A mayoral sash printed with a tiny brolly motif. A baker who arranges pies in the shape of an opened canopy. A pub that names its stout the Drip Defender." In the midst of this shift, you meet Miss Nessa Stroud, a schoolteacher from Perth who becomes a minor folk hero. One rainy day, she leads her pupils in a parade of hand-painted umbrellas through town, each child proudly dry and beaming. When challenged by a constable, she replies with devastating politeness, "If teaching the alphabet requires dry paper, sir, then surely umbrellas are part of the curriculum." The story spreads like wet ink on parchment. Songs are written. A ballad titled The Educated Drizzle climbs the tavern charts. Yet, even as umbrellas seep into daily life, the social undercurrent remains uneasy. You spot an elderly couple arguing outside a grocer's shop. She has an umbrella, he does not. "You used to be made of granite," he growls. "Aye," she retorts, "but now I'm dry granite." This is where you begin to realize, Scotland isn't just having a fashion crisis. It's having a national identity crisis. And at the heart of it is the humble umbrella, dangling, dripping, defiant. The rain begins again. You pull your collar up. And whether you like it or not, you're starting to understand both sides. You take a final glance toward a stone bench where a small plaque reads, "In memory of Fergus Maclaw, who refused the umbrella, and caught his death, but looked very dignified doing so." You wake up, not from sleep, but from a daze. A drizzle-soft trance broken only by the sound of a carriage while splashing through a puddle far too large for polite society. The air smells of wet soot and rain-drenched daisies. And now, it's 1826. The year umbrellas go underground, literally. Remember that secret society Lady Isla McRae started? Well, they've taken things to the next level. You descend a narrow stone staircase hidden behind a grocer's in Dundee. At the bottom, behind a curtain made of damp tweed, lies one of the strangest clubs in Scottish history, the Order of the Dripless Dawn. Yes, the name is ridiculous. But the people? Dead serious. You walk into a candlelit cellar filled with mismatched chairs, stacks of blueprints, and at least one large haggis with googly eyes, no explanation given. The air is warm, buzzing with whispered excitement. It's part knitting circle, part resistance movement. Their slogan is carved into the wood above the hearth. "Let not the cloud decide the measure of our joy." A man named Angus Bainbridge takes the floor. He's short, round, and wearing a cape made of waterproof parchment. He looks like a heroic mushroom. Angus lays out the plan, Umbrella Integration Week. The mission: quietly distribute umbrellas to sympathetic public figures, teachers, doctors, postal workers, even a few clergy. Give them tools, guidance, and, most importantly, plausible deniability. Don't just convert minds, Angus says with a grin. Convert wardrobes. The group applauds. They begin with the train stations. Porters are gifted collapsible umbrellas that clip onto belts. Nobody notices until a week later, when one is seen discreetly opening his to shield an elderly lady. A newspaper prints a photo. No scandal follows. Encouraged, they move on to bakeries, barbers, even brothels. One particularly forward-thinking madam commissions umbrellas in velvet with tassels. They become collector's items. Historians still argue whether the Order's efforts were the real turning point in public sentiment, or whether society was simply too tired of being damp. Either way, this slow, steady diffusion of umbrella use changes the tone of the debate. But it doesn't stop the resistance. You're walking through the harbour town of Oban when you stumble upon a strange performance. Two men, wearing raincoats but holding no umbrellas, are reenacting scenes from Shakespeare using only puddles and interpretive stomping. You've found the Soaked Stage Company, a protest theatre troupe known for mocking umbrella culture by embracing extreme wetness. Their signature production, Mac Umbrella, a tragicomedy where Lady Macbeth drowns in a sea of unmet expectations and leaking tent flaps. Audiences love it. Or at least, they clap with damp hands. And yet, even the soaked stage isn't immune to irony. One cast member is spotted shielding his script under a discreet oilskin canopy. The scandal is swift. The press calls it Leakgate. He's replaced with a less absorbent understudy. Meanwhile, debates flare in Parliament. One MP, Douglas Havers of Kirriemua, stands up to declare umbrellas a silent assault on Scottish masculinity. He insists real men face the sky with chin high and collar soaked. A rival MP simply opens an umbrella mid-speech. The crowd laughs. Havers resigns the following year, citing creative dampness of the soul. Outside the political sphere, you begin noticing another trend. Children. In schools, in alleyways, on moors, children are drawing umbrellas in chalk. They build them from sticks and paper. They shout brolly power and run around like miniature meteorological superheroes. One curious boy even attaches an umbrella to a sheep, hoping to create the world's first rain-resistant livestock. The sheep is unimpressed. But here's where it gets weirder. You attend a wedding in Falkirk. The bride arrives under a floral parasol. No one bats an eye. The groom bows beneath it to kiss her. The crowd throws petals. The local pastor mutters something about the apocalypse. A photo makes its way to the society pages. The caption reads, "Love, laughter, and light drizzle." Then, one quiet morning in June, a turning point. The Royal Edinburgh Museum unveils a new exhibit, Objects of Modern Scotland. Among them, a single, elegantly mounted umbrella, black canopy, rosewood handle, glass tip. It's presented not as a curiosity, but as a symbol of change. Visitors are split. Some scoff. Others nod silently. But the floodgates, or should we say rain flaps, are open. Shops begin selling functional parasols that aren't technically umbrellas but serve the same purpose. Churches start keeping a few at the door for emergencies. One clever grocer renames them sky shades and triples his sales. Still, not everyone bends. In the Highland village of Dorney, there's an infamous event known as the Umbrella Purge. Led by Constable Ewan Stoneface Mackay, villagers confiscate over 300 umbrellas and burn them in a ceremonial bonfire. The smell of scorched nylon and social tension lingers for weeks. It's hard to say whether Stoneface's actions were legal. But they were definitely damp with irony, because that very week, someone carves a message into the public bench beside the lock. Rain falls on fools and heroes alike. And that's what this all comes down to, isn't it? This isn't a debate about dryness anymore. It's a referendum on identity, on tradition, on who gets to decide what counts as strength. You see it in the lines on an old fisherman's face as he stares at the umbrella his granddaughter made for him out of wool, string, and whatever magic kids possess. He opens it. It leaks. But he doesn't close it. You feel it as you pass a street musician in Stirling, his violin case open to collect coins and his umbrella tilted slightly to keep the instrument dry. Someone drops a note in the case, for dignity, not cowardice. The battle has gone quiet now, but it's not over. Not yet. It lingers in the puddles, in the jokes told in pubs, in the hesitant hand that reaches for the handle each time a drop hits the nose. But you're seeing something else too, a new kind of pride. One that can coexist with practicality. One that knows it's okay to evolve, even if it means carrying a portable roof. It's 1827 now, and you find yourself on a windswept hill outside of Stirling, watching what can only be described as a full-scale mock battle, fought entirely with umbrellas. Welcome to the Battle of Brolly Bray, not an actual military encounter, but a wildly theatrical spectacle put on by a renegade drama guild called the Damp Rebellion. 30-odd men, women, and a highly suspicious goat in a bonnet have gathered in period costume to reenact the imagined fall of umbrella tyranny. On one side, the pro-Brolly rebels, wielding tartan-covered umbrellas like spears. On the other, the Barehead Battalion, armed with rain-soaked sticks and biting sarcasm. The battle ends when the goat eats half a parasol and both sides collapse laughing. You chuckle too. But not just because it's absurd. Because somewhere in the silliness lies the real heart of the debate. When does a tool become a symbol? And when does a symbol become a threat? These questions hang heavier than the clouds above. Now imagine you're back in Edinburgh, the streets shining from a recent drizzle, the smell of damp stone and pipe smoke curling through the air. You step into the smoky back room of a pub called the Squinty Lad, where the country's most unexpected anti-umbrella crusader is about to take the stage, Reverend Charles Dunsby. Yes, a man of the cloth, normally averse to public spectacle, is here to deliver what will become known as the Sermon of the Canopied Coward. Dunsby begins calmly, quoting scripture. Then, slowly, he builds toward a passionate crescendo. When we shield ourselves from heaven's lessons, we grow soft. Rain is penance. Rain is grace. To deny the rain is to deny struggle, and without struggle, there is no strength. Someone coughs. A dramatic one. He lifts a bucket and dumps it over his own head. The crowd gasps. You're not sure whether to clap or offer him a towel. That speech goes viral, or as viral as anything could in the 1820s. It's reprinted in pamphlets, sung in taverns, and even referenced during a trial in Dundee where a man is fined for carrying an umbrella during a funeral. But not everyone agrees with Dunsby's apocalyptic outlook. In fact, umbrella ownership continues to grow, albeit quietly. Shops begin offering rain disguises, long, cape-like jackets with hidden slits for deploying discreet brollies. Young women in Glasgow design hand-painted umbrellas as courting gifts, complete with secret compartments for love letters or, in one case, a terrifyingly lifelike moth. Meanwhile, in Aberdeen, two rival pub owners engage in a multi-week prank war involving umbrella sabotage. One fills the other's stock with collapsing models. The other retaliates by training a raven to perch on opened umbrellas and screech, fraud, at passers-by. It's around this time that a curious new term enters public discourse, umbrella shaming. Coined in a letter to the Northern Whistle, the writer complains. Last Thursday I exited a tea shop with my modest parasol. 3 youths followed me home, chanting DRY witch, in falsetto. Must we live like this? The paper runs a cartoon alongside the letter, an umbrella being led to a public dunking chair, its handle bent in shame. Still, even as tensions flare, a strange détente forms in the city of Dundee. You visit one morning just after dawn. A sign posted in the central square reads, "Brollies before 9. Bareheads by 10. It's an unofficial truce. Citizens may carry umbrellas before 9 a.m., particularly en route to work or school. After that, they are expected to brave the elements, lest the weather defeat our faces." It's absurd. It's brilliant. And it works, for a while. Then comes the fashion disaster of the decade. In 1828, the influential Lady Morphin McCallum hosts a garden soirée with a strict no umbrellas rule. Guests are encouraged to embrace natural sogginess. Unfortunately, the skies do more than drizzle. They erupt. Hours later, half the attendees are soaked, shivering, and stuck in the garden maze. A visiting French diplomat loses his wig in a puddle and declares the event an act of meteorological treason. The fallout is swift. Whispers begin, "She didn't even provide cloaks. I saw someone drinking rainwater out of a champagne flute." The piano grew mushrooms. Morphin's social standing plummets. And umbrella sympathetic society takes note. Denial of practicality is no longer fashionable, it's dangerous. Historians still argue whether this event marked the decline of anti-umbrella snobbery or just exposed the upper classes' impracticality in a particularly soggy way. Either way, you see a shift. Artists begin creating umbrella-themed tapestries. Children are taught to draw them in lessons about shelter and protection. A satirical novel titled The Waterproof Aristocrat becomes a surprise bestseller. You even meet an inventor, Professor Archibald Griggs, who unveils a contraption he calls the hydrophobic mobility hood. It's essentially an umbrella that follows you autonomously on a wheeled platform. It's massive. It growls. It once ran over a cat. But it's a hit with eccentrics. More importantly, public sentiment is changing. You walk through a park in Inverness and see 3 generations of a family picnicking under a shared tartan brolly. They're laughing, sharing oatcakes, telling stories of how things used to be when umbrellas were taboo. And somewhere in the breeze, you hear a new phrase whispered like a lullaby. It's not weakness to want comfort. You pause. That's the moment you realize the ban isn't holding. Not because it was repealed, it wasn't. Not yet. But because people have simply stopped caring. They're tired of wet socks. Tired of performative dampness. Tired of choosing between pride and practicality. The law still lingers on the books, gathering metaphorical dust alongside other relics like no swearing at sheep and do not duel before breakfast. But on the streets, the umbrellas are back. In quiet defiance, in cheeky display, in whispered rebellion. You spot a young girl skipping through the rain with an umbrella painted like the night sky. A boy follows, pretending to be a comet. No one stops them. Not anymore. And the clouds? They just keep doing what they've always done. You're sitting in the corner booth of a small cafe in Perth, rain pattering gently on the window beside you, your tea steaming in its chipped cup, when a man bursts in dramatically, flinging his damp overcoat with theatrical flair. "The Queen has been seen with an umbrella," he announces, panting. Silence spreads across the room like spilled ink. Forks pause mid-bite. A spoon clinks in slow motion. Someone drops a buttered scone. You blink. Did he say the Queen? Yes. Queen Adelaide herself, German-born, dignified, and famously weather-unfazed, has reportedly been photographed, well, sketched, using a modest black umbrella during a private stroll in the royal gardens. A blurry image, inked by a curious court artist, is already circulating in illustrated gazettes. It causes what historians would politely call a collective damp meltdown. You feel it in the air, like that heavy tension before a thunderstorm. One newspaper calls it a betrayal of royal metal. Another claims the sketch is forged by foreign agents trying to undermine Scottish resilience. But most ordinary folks, they cheer. Suddenly, it's not just about weather anymore. It's about class. Authority. The right to choose dryness over tradition, especially when even queens are quietly choosing comfort. Across the nation, whispered brolly use shifts into full-on trend. You stroll through Glasgow and see shops openly displaying umbrellas in their front windows, no longer disguised as portable awnings or handheld cloud buffers. There's one styled like a peacock feather fan. Another glows in the dark. A cheeky black and white model declares rain happens in Gothic script. Even clergymen start easing their resistance. A certain Father Alistair Keegan, who once compared umbrellas to moral decay with a handle, is spotted beneath one shaped like a stained glass dome. When asked, he mumbles something about protecting scripture from mildew. Meanwhile, up in the Hebrides, A more theatrical display of rebellion is underway. You catch wind of it while riding a Ratley ferry to the Isle of Lewis, where locals have staged an annual festival called Dripfest. It's part pagan ritual, part political statement, and entirely bizarre. Picture this: torchlit dances in ponchos, fire-juggling jugglers wearing shower caps, and a competitive umbrella decorating contest where the winning design is a scale model of Hadrian's Wall that opens and closes like an accordion. The event culminates in a solemn baptism of the brolly, in which townspeople wade into the ocean, umbrellas aloft, and declare themselves cleansed of social shame. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. And it works. The media reports it with mild condescension and growing admiration. One journalist describes it as the most heartfelt act of soggy defiance since the rainy revolt of 21. Still, not everyone joins the love-in. You return to the mainland to find the remnants of the Umbrella Purity League clinging to relevance. They hold weekly meetings in Kelso, now reduced to 3 aging members and one suspiciously hairless cat named Sir Moistington. Their latest protest? Handing out soggy pamphlets featuring stick figures being struck down by lightning for umbrella pride. It doesn't land. Instead, a school teacher named Miss Tilda Ramsey takes a stand. She begins incorporating umbrellas into her geography curriculum not as a symbol of rebellion, but as a teaching tool. Her students build tiny weather dioramas, complete with paper clouds and functioning miniature umbrellas triggered by rain sensors. One child even programs his umbrella to say "Excuse me, cloud, I'm busy today" every time it opens. The story makes national headlines. "The youth have spoken," blares one headline. "Dry is the new brave." You hear a quote from Tilda in an interview. "The rain doesn't care about your politics. Why should our umbrellas?" By 1829, something strange is happening. It's not that the umbrella ban has been formally lifted. It's that almost no one enforces it anymore. Police quietly tuck their own brollies under benches. Judges avoid eye contact when umbrellas appear in courtrooms. Even the Postmaster General is seen holding a particularly jaunty polka dot model during an inspection tour. Historians still argue whether this was a sign of progress or mass apathy. One thing is clear: the cultural tide has turned. You see it in shop signs. "Come in dry or stay damp, we don't judge." You hear it in lullabies sung to children. "Raindrops fall, but you'll be fine if you've got your brolly in a line." There's even a new wedding tradition sprouting among more adventurous couples, exchanging vows beneath a shared umbrella, symbolizing mutual shelter. Some clergymen embrace it. Others grumble into their soaked cassocks. But just when you think things are smoothing out, a hiccup. A rising voice from within the scientific community begins to question the umbrella not for cultural reasons, but for environmental ones. You sit in on a lecture by eccentric meteorologist Dr. Penelope Gratch, who insists that mass umbrella use could theoretically disrupt natural weather absorption patterns in urban microclimates. No one really understands what she means, but her beard of mossy lichen commands respect. Dr. Gratch presents charts, hand-drawn and annotated in crayon, to a bemused room of weather enthusiasts. The key takeaway? She fears the umbrella may become a symbol of human arrogance against sky law. You quietly scoot your chair back. While her theory doesn't catch on broadly, it sparks enough buzz that several towns briefly trial umbrella-free Wednesdays to appease eco-conscious citizens. It lasts until one particularly soggy Wednesday sends 3 wedding parties fleeing to the nearest cow barn. The experiment is declared a noble failure. By now, it's clear, Scotland is no longer fighting the umbrella. It's taming it, integrating it, making it Scottish. And yet, the ban remains. Still technically in force. Still lingering on scrolls of dusty law parchment in some forgotten cabinet in Edinburgh. A sleeping statute, irrelevant but intact. You pause and ask yourself, why? Why hasn't someone simply repealed it? And that's when you hear whispers of the Rain Charter, an ancient document, long hidden, said to predate the umbrella entirely, said to contain the very origin of Scotland's strange relationship with the sky. But whether it's real or just another damp myth, you're not sure. Yet. You're in the archives now. And not just any archives, the forbidden lower stacks beneath the National Library of Scotland, a place so damp, so stone-cold, and so thick with the scent of mildewed parchment that your eyelashes feel heavier just breathing the air. A kindly but suspiciously quiet librarian named Morag, whose glasses are always fogged up, leads you to a sealed chamber marked restricted. Climate documents, weird. She unlocks the rusted gate with a key shaped like a weather vane. And there it is, resting under a cracked pane of glass and a guardian spider the size of a ham sandwich. The Rain Charter. It's not grand. No velvet case. No regal ribbon. Just a lumpy scroll, warped from centuries of moisture, its ink faded but legible. You lean in. The opening line makes your scalp tingle. He who shields from the sky shall forsake the land's respect. Ominous. Poetic. Confusing. You read on, carefully tracing the tangled script with your eyes. Turns out, the charter was drafted in the year 1423, not long after the Great Cloudfall, a bizarre climatic episode when Scotland reportedly endured 78 straight days of mist, interrupted only by a brief hailstorm that rearranged a flock of sheep into perfect concentric circles. Local law claims this prolonged wetness inspired the early Highland councils to declare sky exposure a sacred form of humility. The charter codified it: if the heavens weep, so must you. Anything else was considered vanity. It was partly practical. At the time, most coverings were made of animal hide or oiled linen, not exactly chic, and prone to leaking in comical spurts. But beyond logistics, the ethos stuck. Umbrellas, the charter warned, are the dome of denial. You chuckle at the phrase. Still, the reverence with which it was written unnerves you. Not because it's mystical, but because it's so committed. And herein lies the truth. Scotland's resistance to umbrellas wasn't born of fashion or elitism. It was seeded in centuries of philosophy, a national belief that to know the land, you must feel the land. You remember the shepherd's proverb scribbled in the margins. If ye never cursed wet wool, ye not truly Scottish. Now, historians still argue whether the Rain Charter was binding legal code or just very persuasive poetry. But what's clear is that, somewhere along the line, it began to shape public behavior. It influenced laws, sermons, even wedding vows. It whispered in ears during drizzle and shouted through downpours. And in the 1600s, it was quietly invoked to draft what would become the earliest known version of the Umbrella Statute, passed by the Edinburgh Council of Outer Goods in 1611. You flip to another scroll, this one crisp and brittle. A footnote reads, "Let it be known that contraptions of shielding nature shall not be carried within city bounds, lest the bearer be fined a shilling or made to walk with dampened trousers for 1 hour." The punishment was both economic and moist. You close the charter slowly, a strange weight settling on your shoulders. This wasn't just about weather. This was heritage. And that explains why, even as attitudes changed, the law itself was never repealed. Because deep down, it felt like erasing a part of Scotland's soul. Back outside, you wander the streets of Edinburgh with fresh eyes. You pass a couple kissing beneath a shared umbrella, laughing as the rain patters around them. An old man sips soup under a tiny parasol clipped to his hat. A child tugs on his mother's coat, asking if clouds get sad. The umbrellas are everywhere, and no one's hiding them. You follow a group of tourists into the Museum of Weather Oddities, where a new exhibit titled Brollies and Backlash is drawing crowds. It features a timeline of the umbrella controversy, including Reverend Dunsby's soaked sermons, the Battle of Brolly Bray, complete with miniature reenactment figures, and Lady Morphin's infamous rain-soaked garden party dress, which still squelches slightly under glass. You find yourself standing before a digital display that lets you vote on whether the ban should finally be repealed. You press yes. A pixelated Scotsman thanks you and twirls a cartoon umbrella with a wink. As you turn to leave, you catch the whisper of an argument near the cafe. Two older women, possibly sisters, definitely professional worriers, are bickering over whether their grandmother ever used an umbrella. She always wore a bonnet, one insists. That's not the same as being anti-umbrella, Mary, the other retorts, adjusting her own polka dot brolly. And that's the new Scotland. Not divided. Not defiant. Just debating. In the rain. The once unthinkable has become normal. Even trendy. There's a brolly-themed escape room in Stirling now. A boutique in Ayr specializes in matching umbrellas and scarves for dogs. And in Aberdeen, a university research project is underway to design biodegradable umbrellas made from compressed heather and kelp. The prototype smells faintly of ocean and bad decisions. You try one. It collapses on your head. Twice. Progress. Still, the charter's words linger in your mind. He who shields from the sky. You wonder, was the fear really about weakness? Or about disconnection? About losing that intimate dance between land and people? Because umbrellas do distance us. From drizzle. From discomfort. From the oddly meditative rhythm of raindrops on skin. But also, they let you walk farther. Talk longer. Keep your tea dry and your spectacles unspotted. They create space for conversation, and sometimes, for quiet. So maybe it's not a betrayal. Maybe it's an evolution. An act not of defiance, but of gentleness. And that, finally, is why whispers begin to spread of one final push, a quiet movement gathering to repeal the old ban. Not to mock the past, but to honor it properly by moving forward. Not everyone will agree. Historians still argue whether the repeal effort was truly grassroots, or nudged along by umbrella manufacturers with charming accents and excellent moustaches. But the momentum is real. You can feel it in the rain. You wake to the soft plunk of rain on an iron roof and the smell of someone baking oatcakes 2 floors below. The radio hums from a neighbor's window, crackling with debate. It's the national news. The topic: the umbrella statute repeal proposal, officially tabled in Parliament for the first time in over 400 years. Your pulse picks up. It's happening. No more cheeky legal grey zones. No more umbrella ambivalence. Just a straightforward legislative effort to strike the old ban from the books. And it's got a name as dramatic as it deserves: the Dry Liberty Bill. You sip your tea slower, savoring the absurd historical weight of this moment. For a nation whose identity is practically stitched together with rain, this isn't just a policy change. It's emotional landscaping. You head down the block to the corner pub, the Weeping Thistle, where locals huddle around the telly to watch the first debate unfold. A stout MP named Fergus McTavish opens the session with a monologue so poetic, it threatens to turn into a folk ballad. Our forefathers stood beneath the clouds without complaint, but they also wore wool kilts in sleet. We must ask, were they brave, or simply cold and confused? The room laughs gently. The barkeep serves a round of Cloudsplitter ale in celebration. But not everyone is pleased. An opposing MP, Lady Ashcroft Drimble, a woman who could disapprove of soup for being too spontaneous, rises next. She launches into a defense of heritage hardship, declaring the umbrella a dangerous gateway to pampered behaviors. She warns Parliament of a national softness epidemic. You watch as her colleague beside her discreetly closes his very damp umbrella under the bench. Outside, the public response is delightfully chaotic. In Dundee, there's an impromptu umbrella-themed parade led by a brass band playing St. John in the Rain in slow bagpipe minor. In Aberdeen, activists stage a wet sit-in, refusing to use umbrellas until the law is actually repealed, despite everyone around them already doing so. A Glasgow designer unveils a line of commemorative umbrella pins shaped like tiny clouds with swords through them. The campaign slogan: "Stay dry. Stay defiant. You buy 3. One woman in Inverness organizes a petition calling for the repeal and receives over 50,000 signatures in 24 hours. She claims her motivation is simple. "My fringe has suffered enough. And you know what? She's right." For too long, Scotland's weatherware narrative has been soaked in shame and sogginess. This is about dignity. Dry dignity. Yet under all the cheeky signs and novelty merch, you sense something deeper. A generational shift. You meet a university student named Moira who's leading a youth initiative called Clear Skies Ahead. She's articulate, passionate, and carries a transparent dome umbrella she proudly refers to as my personal observatory. "It's not just about being dry," she says. "It's about reclaiming choice. We shouldn't inherit discomfort just because it's historical." You nod, though part of you still remembers the thrill of those lawless brolly days, the forbidden joy of popping one open as clouds rolled in. Still, this feels right. By week's end, the debate in Parliament reaches its peak. The deciding vote looms. To sway the chamber, a final speech is delivered by the eldest MP, Sir Angus Calder, age 97, who famously crossed the Alps on foot in World War II and hasn't been dry since. He rises slowly, his joints creaking like an old attic. Adjusts his tartan tie. Then delivers what would become known as the Rain Room Address. We do not honor the past by living in its shadow. We honor it by understanding it, then stepping into the light or, if the light's unavailable, stepping under a sensible umbrella with a reinforced spine and a carrying pouch. I vote aye. The chamber erupts into applause. And just like that, after 4 centuries of soggy defiance, poetic punishments, and increasingly elaborate loopholes, the umbrella statute is repealed. Formally, legally, publicly. You join the crowd outside Holyrood as the news breaks. People wave umbrellas like flags. Some launch theirs into the air in wild celebration. One lands on a police officer, who just smiles and tips his hat. Even the weather cooperates, sort of. A gentle mist begins to fall, more ceremonial than soaking. The Prime Minister steps out under a navy umbrella embossed with the national seal. Let this be the last raindrop that separates us from reason. It's a bit dramatic, but you're here for it. You wander the city that night and notice something subtle. People aren't just carrying umbrellas, they're carrying them openly. Proudly. No more stuffing them into satchels or pretending they're walking sticks with trust issues. One cafe offers free umbrella parking. A bookstore displays a new release titled Scotland's Rain Ends. The rain pun is too perfect to resist. And you finally invest in the umbrella of your dreams, a wind-resistant, tartan-trimmed model with a button that plays soft bagpipe music when opened. You name it Gerald. As the repeal celebrations stretch into the next day, a final commemorative act is scheduled, the ceremonial shredding of the original 1611 law scroll. You attend, watching as historians, lawyers, and one very confused goat gather in the courtyard of the National Archives. The scroll, brittle and browning with time, is carefully sliced into symbolic ribbons, then pressed into limited edition bookmarks. One is handed to you. It reads, "Let the sky fall if it must, but let us choose how we meet it." Back home, you place it beside your bed. And outside your window, the rain keeps falling. Gentle. Familiar. But now, it's just weather. Not a battle. Not a statement. Just something to walk through, however you please. You walk down Prince's Street the next morning with the air feeling lighter somehow, like the sky had been holding its breath for centuries and finally exhaled. People smile at strangers now, umbrella handles tucked under arms like newly legal secrets. You spot a group of students using their brollies not just for dryness, but as fashion statements. Leopard print, lead-edged, one shaped like a giant daffodil. One student even has a double-wide umbrella for him and his goldfish, who glares out from a sealed bowl backpack like a Victorian admiral. You nod in respect. Still, even with repeal, not everyone's celebrating. In the countryside, especially the highland pockets where tradition outweighs trend, resistance simmers. You hitch a ride with a documentary crew headed north, filming a post-repeal special called Storm of Change, Scotland after the ban. Your destination, the village of Knockfeather, a place where the rain falls sideways, and no one has forgiven umbrellas for existing. The van climbs winding roads slick with mist, the landscape shifting from green to grey to peat brown. The village appears like a wet postcard, stone houses, mossy roofs, and people in anoraks who look like they've been caught in a light drizzle for decades. At the center of town stands an iron statue of a man brandishing a broken umbrella in one hand and a leak in the other. The plaque reads, Rory Thistlethwaite, Defender of the Drenched. You meet Rory's great-great-granddaughter, Isla, who owns the local bakery. Her scones are divine, her opinions are flint. Rain builds character, she says, slamming dough onto the counter like it owes her rent. An umbrella? That's just coddling in cloth. You glance at your umbrella. Gerald, demurely resting by the door, hums a low bagpipe tone of disapproval. You pretend not to hear. Isla isn't alone. A loosely organized group, the Bearheads, has formed to preserve what they call authentic soaking. They host public lectures with titles like Wet and Proud, The Psychology of Precipitation, and From Sky to Soul, Why Rain Hurts Good. You attend one. The speaker is a wiry man in a poncho who yells every third word and sweats like he's waterproofing himself from the inside. His argument, if you're not squelching by noon, you've failed as a Scot. It gets applause. Still, not everyone in Knockfeather toes the line. At the back of the crowd, a girl named Elsie holds a foldable umbrella with a floral print. She doesn't open it yet, but the way her fingers rest on the buttons says she might. Someday. You speak with her after the lecture. She shrugs. I like the rain. But I also like reading dry books. Reasonable. It's this quiet middle ground, somewhere between proud dampness and practical dryness, that begins to emerge in many rural places. Towns that once mocked umbrellas now stock them beside biscuits. Old men argue over pint glasses about whether umbrella etiquette should involve tipping your hat or twirling the shaft like a sword. Historians still argue whether this slow cultural thaw was inevitable or sparked directly by repeal propaganda. Some say the shift began during the 2012 London Olympics, when the Scottish team entered with a tartan umbrella display that made headlines worldwide. Others point to climate change, increased rains, flooding, and unpredictable skies making practicality outweigh principle. But deep down, it's something else, too. It's generational. In Knockfeather's tiny schoolhouse, the teacher, a man with one eyebrow and 3 umbrellas for emergencies, reads a picture book to the kids. It's called Tam and the Tartan Tent, and it tells the story of a boy who invents a magical umbrella that makes flowers grow wherever it touches the ground. The kids listen wide-eyed. One little boy pipes up. Is Tam real? The teacher winks. Only when it rains. It's moments like these that matter more than speeches or statutes. Small shifts. Gentle stories. Raindrop by raindrop. As you leave the village, the clouds part for the briefest second, revealing a patch of blue. Someone jokes that it's the sky blinking in disbelief. Back in the city, umbrella culture flourishes. Boutiques host umbrella fashion shows. The Scottish Ballet stages Swan Umbrella Lake, with dancers twirling parasols mid-air. A cafe chain introduces a brolly biscuit shaped like a collapsed umbrella and filled with jam. It's oddly satisfying to bite into. Even politicians jump on board. The Prime Minister is spotted holding a Star Wars-themed umbrella during a storm, prompting the tabloids to dub him Darth Drizzle. Approval ratings spike. Meanwhile, a new law is proposed to protect umbrella expression rights. No public shaming for umbrella size, color, or impracticality. People rejoice. But not all umbrella stories are joyful. There's the story of old Mr. Wallace in Fife, who finally tries an umbrella at age 91 and is swept 3 blocks by a rogue gust of wind. He lands softly in a haystack and declares, "Worth it." Or the couple who get engaged under an umbrella in Stirling, only for the ring to slip into a gutter mid-kiss. Recovered 2 hours later by a ferret in a reflective vest. Long story. Still, for every mishap, 100 quiet triumphs bloom. A grandmother keeps her Sunday paper dry for the first time in decades. A street poet writes undercover, and for once, the ink doesn't run. And you take long walks in soft rain now, umbrella in hand, thoughts drifting lazily like puddles down cobbled alleys. You pass under trees and watch droplets pool on Gerald's canopy, feeling the gentle thrum of each fall. It's a new rhythm. A quiet one. But it's yours now. Because you're part of the generation that didn't just witness the repeal, you lived it. And when future historians look back, when they debate whether the great umbrella shift of the 2020s was culture, climate, or coincidence, you'll know the truth. It was all of it. And none of it. It was just people deciding to be a little drier. Together. You're sipping a lukewarm tea on the veranda when the courier arrives, slightly damp and out of breath. He hands you a glossy envelope stamped with gold ink, the first annual Scottish Umbrella Congress. You blink, reread, and smile. Because of course there's a congress now. The invitation is clear. Enthusiasts, historians, designers, and weather philosophers are gathering in Edinburgh for a multi-day celebration of all things umbrella. Panels, demonstrations, historical reenactments, and a gala with the theme from drizzle to dazzle. Naturally, you RSVP yes before you've even changed out of your slippers. 3 weeks later, you step off the train at Waverley Station and instantly notice the umbrellas. Everywhere. On bags, in hands, on lapels, even printed on socks. It's like a rainy Hogwarts reunion with less magic and more Gore-Tex. The Royal Highland Centre has been transformed into a canopy of colourful pavilions, all interconnected by translucent plastic tunnels. The effect is surreal, like walking through a rain cloud designed by IKEA. You get your name badge, "Hello, I'm slightly moist," and your welcome kit, which includes a souvenir umbrella charm, complimentary poncho, and a tiny packet of emergency Earl Grey. Just in case. The opening keynote is delivered by none other than Professor Tilda Brochan, Scotland's preeminent weather historian and author of Skyward Suffering, The Myth of Noble Dampness. She strides on stage with theatrical flair, flanked by 2 assistants holding vintage parasols. Her speech begins. It is no longer illegal to open an umbrella in this country. But the larger opening, one in our minds, is still unfolding. You almost clap mid-sip. She goes on to explain that Scotland's former umbrella ban, while absurd, represented something deeper, a cultural suspicion of comfort, of ease, of self-protection. We wore the cold like armor, the wet, like identity. And now, she says, it's time to shift, not forget, not erase, but evolve. You attend workshops like Brolly's Through the Ages, where actors perform monologues as historical umbrellas. One weeps in character as Queen Victoria's parasol. Another delivers a jazz number as a 1960s London commuter brolly with commitment issues. There's a lecture on umbrella ergonomics titled Spokes and Spines, Engineering for Elegance, where you learn that the average Scottish umbrella once had fewer structural supports than a toddler's drawing of a spider. In the vendor hall, things get out of hand quickly. A man in a kilt tries to sell you an umbrella shaped like a haggis. You respectfully decline. A startup unveils an AI-powered umbrella that tilts in response to wind shifts and sings sea shanties when opened near the coast. You buy too. There's also controversy. The traditionalists' tent features vintage rain cloaks and pamphlets titled "When Wet Was Honorable." One elderly gentleman shakes his cane and mutters about synthetic shame canopies. You back away slowly, umbrella first. Then you find the exhibit that makes your breath catch. It's the original 1611 ban parchment, framed in triple glass and displayed under low lighting. Browned and brittle, the ink still legible. You lean in, reading the archaic script. The wording is oddly poetic. Let none darest raise skyshade 'gainst the divine melancholy of heatheness tears, lest pride drip from their souls. A curator nearby whispers, we think it was written during a thunderstorm. Or a breakup. You chuckle, but your chest tightens a little. This relic, this absurd relic, held centuries of sway. All that soggy seriousness, all that lawful damp. Now it's just history. And yet, a fascinating one. Historians still argue whether the original ban had political motives. Some theories suggest a power move by the wool industry, whose cloaks sold better when people got drenched. Others say it was rooted in Calvinist austerity. One rogue theory blames a royal dog attack involving a startled spaniel and a spring-loaded brolly. Regardless, its symbolism remains. The parchment now tours schools and museums as a mobile reminder of how far the nation has come, from outlawing shelter to celebrating it. You close your eyes and imagine the future. Children giggling under cartoon umbrellas. Couples proposing beneath personalized canopies. Grandparents telling rain-drenched tales of the days when dryness was defiance. Later that night, you attend the gala. The theme is ambitious. Everyone must arrive with an umbrella that reflects their personal weather philosophy. You spot a woman in a cloud-shaped dress with a tiny rain cloud drone hovering above her head. A man wears a storm-themed cloak that sparks gently with static electricity every time someone compliments his umbrella, which is also a lamp. You come as yourself, with Gerald, your trusty tartan friend, adorned with tiny fairy lights and a pin that reads, "Legal, at last." The dance floor is slick, the music delightfully 1980s, and at some point, a conga line of umbrellas forms. You join without hesitation. As the night winds down, guests gather outside beneath a drizzling sky. Someone opens a massive umbrella, a 3-meter-wide monstrosity that fits 20 people, and invites everyone in. You all huddle beneath it like birds under a bush, laughing, sharing tea, and listening to the soft percussion of rain on nylon. It feels like a closing chapter, but also a beginning. The Congress ends with a final toast, to rain, to reason, and to ridiculous laws we outgrow. You clink teacups with strangers, hearts warm, heads dry. And as you step back into the damp night, umbrella folded but ready, you realize, you haven't just witnessed history. You've stood beneath it. You return home to find your neighbor, Mr. Crumley, perched on a lawn chair under what appears to be a beach umbrella, sipping soup directly from a thermos. He waves, sloshing minestrone onto his gardening gloves. "Making up for lost time," he says. 30 years I've walked to work soaked to the knees. I'm dry now. Chronically dry." You laugh. But his words stay with you. Because it's not just about the umbrella anymore. It's about time. Time spent drenched, defiant, and damp with misplaced pride. Time lost to stubborn tradition. Time reclaimed through tiny revolutions, one canopy at a time. In the weeks after the Congress, the media catches wind of the umbrella wave. International coverage rolls in. A French documentary team calls it La Résistance Hamide. CNN runs a special titled Britain's Last Great Umbrella War and why it ended with a party. The Japanese send a delegation to study hydrocultural reform. Even Hollywood sniffs opportunity. Soon there's news of a dramatized miniseries in production, Scotland Dry, starring someone suspiciously handsome as you. They've made you taller. And oddly good at fencing. You get used to being interviewed. Not because you're famous, though Gerald does have his own Instagram now, but because you're representative. Of a moment. Of change. Of choosing comfort without shame. At one point, you're asked to give a TED talk. You decline. But you do send them a doodle of a stick figure with an umbrella saying, "It's okay not to be wet." They publish it anyway. Meanwhile, umbrella design evolves rapidly. Companies start producing customizable brollies that play soft jazz when opened. Some glow in the dark. Others release light mists of lavender or peppermint, creating your own mobile rain spa. And yet, not everyone is happy with these upgrades. A new faction forms, calling themselves the pluviophile purists. Their motto, "Rain should be felt, not filtered." You find their leaflets in cafes, soggy pamphlets with statements like each drop is a kiss from the sky. Poetic, if a bit damp. You attend one of their public gatherings, a drizzle vigil in Inverness, where members stand silently in the rain holding nothing but leaflets and intense eye contact. One man weeps with joy when it starts hailing. Historians still argue whether these fringe reactions are genuine counterculture or just nostalgic cosplay. Some say it's a cycle. Every comfort inspires a counter-comfort movement. Others claim umbrella overexposure diluted its mystique, once a rebellion, now just weatherwear. Back in your own life, the impact continues quietly. Your local library launches a read under the Brolly program. Kids borrow books and umbrellas together, encouraged to read outdoors in drizzle. You see them sometimes, little silhouettes under mushroom-shaped domes, paging through picture books about rainy dragons or cloud-riding mice. The bookstore down the road begins selling umbrella stands shaped like famous Scottish monuments. There's a Loch Ness one that looks suspiciously like a noodle bowl. You buy too. Gerald becomes something of a local mascot. A nearby cafe names a drink after him, the tartan cloud, a mix of hot milk, spiced tea, and just a hint of honeyed rainwater, filtered, of course. It's oddly soothing. And still, the rain falls. Day after day, sometimes light, sometimes sideways. But now, when it does, you no longer see heads bowed and coats cinched in solemnity. You see colors, patterns, little bursts of joy twirling through traffic, bobbing between buildings, nodding politely at each other on tight pavements. You pass an elderly couple in matching umbrellas, hers floral, his polka-dotted. You overhear one say, "I never thought I'd live to see the day umbrellas were legal, let alone stylish." And as they shuffle past, arm in arm, dry as toast, you realize something deeper. This wasn't just a law overturned. It was a culture softened. A crusty pride given permission to evolve. You get home, hang Gerald on his hook, he jingles softly, someone added a tiny bell, and sink into the couch. The weather app buzzes, rain tomorrow. Heavy. All day. You smile. Because now, that's not a warning. It's an invitation. It begins with a letter. Handwritten, postmarked from somewhere in the Highlands, sealed with an ink-stamped umbrella and smelling faintly of peat and marmalade. You open it cautiously, half expecting another overly poetic invitation to a pluviophile purist mud ritual, but no. This one is different. Inside, a single sheet of thick parchment and an invitation to join a field excursion of cultural relevance. The destination? Glenhadrick, a long-forgotten village where, according to local folklore, the very first umbrella rebellion took place. You're skeptical. Glenhadrick doesn't appear on any of your maps. But you're also intrigued. You pack Gerald, 3 oat bars, and your sturdiest boots, and you go. It takes a train, 2 buses, and a borrowed bicycle to reach the glen. Mist rolls low across the hills as you arrive, giving the place an eerie hush. The village is small, barely a dozen stone cottages, and seems perpetually stuck somewhere between memory and fog. You're greeted by a woman named Isla, who wears a cloak made of stitched-together umbrellas and introduces herself as the local weather witch, but only part-time. She smiles as though this is entirely normal. "We've been waiting for someone like you," she says, completely deadpan. She leads you to a hilltop chapel with mossy steps and a thatched roof. Inside, a group of villagers, no more than 10, all over the age of 70, sit in a semicircle, each holding a different historical umbrella. One by one, they tell stories. Not from books. From life. One man recounts sneaking his mother's parasol into school as a boy, only to be caught and forced to write lines, "I must feel the weather as God intended." A woman describes her aunt hiding an umbrella beneath a floorboard for 20 years, using it only during illness and shame. Another chokes up describing a man he once loved who carried a yellow umbrella in secret, only opening it at night under moonlight to feel safe under something that wasn't judgment. You sit there, still, heart thudding. These people lived it. The ban wasn't just a strange law on parchment, it was part of their daily fear, their defiance, their selfhood. Not just weather politics. Weather identity. Historians still argue whether Glenhadrick was truly the first village to resist the law. Some believe the whole tale is apocryphal, a folk myth conjured during a particularly rainy festival. But the emotion in the room is real. No footnotes needed. Then Isla gestures to the back of the chapel, where a long object lies beneath a tartan sheet. She pulls it back to reveal an enormous umbrella. Handmade. Ancient. Its wood is worn smooth by fingers long gone, its canopy hand-stitched from wool and seal gut. Oddly beautiful. Oddly defiant. We believe this was the first umbrella opened in public after the 1611 ban, Isla whispers. Legend says it was hoisted in the town square during a thunderstorm, by a midwife. That makes you pause. She was delivering a baby and refused to let rain get in the way, Isla continues. She said, "No bear no mine comes into this world soaked." You don't know if it's true. But in this moment, under creaking rafters and flickering lanterns, it feels truer than most things you've read in libraries. You step forward and place a hand on the old umbrella's handle. It's warmer than expected. The room quiets. Then a soft rumble of thunder outside. Someone laughs. Without speaking, everyone rises and walks out of the chapel into the misty evening. The storm has rolled in, gentle but insistent. Rain patters on stone and grass. A collective breath is drawn. And one by one, umbrellas bloom like flowers in reverse spring. Old ones. New ones. Some homemade. Some bright, others dignified in their gloom. You open Gerald with a satisfying click. He hums softly in the breeze. The villagers move together toward the square, where a small stone fountain trickles beneath a row of mossy gargoyles. A fiddle begins to play, no fanfare, no performance, just music born from water and wood and memory. You dance. Not well, but sincerely. And you realize something between the turns. This isn't reenactment. It's restoration. Of dignity. Of delight. Of a heritage drenched in irony but now carried with pride. Someone hands you a dram of whiskey in a rainproof cup and toasts to the midwife and her sky shield. Everyone laughs, and the story's now yours too. That night, you sleep in a converted sheep barn, cozy, dry, and filled with the gentle snores of sheep who apparently believe they're allowed in the Airbnb. Rain drums the tin roof like lullabies in Morse code. And you dream of umbrellas. Not as objects, but as people. Carrying burdens overhead, quietly sheltering those beside them, unfolding at just the right moment, not to hide from the world, but to move through it with a little more grace. You return from Glenhadrick with a sense of calm that even Edinburgh traffic can't shake. Gerald, now gently perfumed with Highland heather, hangs proudly by the door, and your neighbours nod at you with the kind of knowing respect usually reserved for people who've met minor royalty or survived karaoke in Glasgow. Back in the city, change has fully settled in. Rain no longer dictates the mood, umbrellas do. They've become social cues, fashion statements, even conversation starters. On crowded sidewalks, people lift theirs politely to let others pass, like a gallant fencing salute. Strangers compliment colors, share dry corners, and sometimes swap umbrellas altogether just for fun. You're clearly more of a flamingo polka dot person, someone once told you mid-crosswalk, and handed over their brolly without another word. It's an odd time. Soft, but vivid. You begin noticing other changes too, subtle shifts in the national psyche. The weather forecasts are no longer framed as what to endure, but what to enjoy. Rainy days are marketed by cafes as reading weather or perfect for muffin days. In fact, muffin sales have inexplicably tripled. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether these correlations signal a broader mood shift, or just clever seasonal marketing. Meanwhile, academia catches up. Universities offer new modules like precipitation politics in post-Union Scotland and the umbrella as cultural artifact. Student groups perform reenactments of historic rainstorms with interpretive umbrellas. You attend one. It's very modern dance. You don't quite get it. But the umbrellas are fabulous. Museums create new exhibits. The National Museum of Scotland unveils Under the Brolly, a wet history. The centre of the gallery, that very first umbrella from Glenhadrick, loaned with ceremony and a handwritten note from Isla, mind the ghosts. They like to hover near the wool. Tourists flock. People begin asking, quite seriously, if Scotland was always this romantic, this whimsical. Locals smile and reply, no. We used to be far soggier and 10 times grumpier. Then one day, while watching a flock of teenagers sword-fighting with retractable umbrellas on Arthur's Seat, a new weekly trend called Umbrawl, you get a message. It's from Parliament. Well, a cultural envoy technically, requesting your attendance at a formal ceremony, the final decommissioning of the original umbrella ban legislation, complete with a symbolic last drying of the scroll. You're skeptical. Ceremonies tend to be either long or laughable. Sometimes both. But curiosity wins. You accept. A week later, you find yourself in a high-ceilinged room lined with mahogany panels and very serious-looking busts. The scroll sits on a velvet cushion like some ancient beast ready for slaying. A small orchestra plays a Baroque version of Singing in the Rain. The Minister for Culture steps forward. She's wearing rain boots with cartoon frogs on them. She clears her throat and begins. For over 4 centuries, this parchment declared umbrellas unfit for Scottish hands. Today, we say otherwise. We say brollies belong. There's polite applause. A ceremonial hairdryer is used to dry the scroll one last time, a metaphor, apparently, and it is then placed in a display case under gentle misting for dramatic ambience. Later that evening, you're invited to a rooftop gathering. Someone's hung strings of fairy lights between open umbrellas, creating little constellations of color overhead. There are trays of shortbread and rain-shaped biscuits. A choir performs a medley of songs with the word rain in them. You lose count after 17. But amid all the celebration, one moment lingers. A young girl tugs at your sleeve. Are you the umbrella person? She asks, eyes wide behind oversized glasses. You nod, somewhat amused. She holds up a small handmade umbrella, crafted from paper, string, and probably too much glue. This one's for you, she says. So you always have one, even when it's not raining. You thank her. It's not waterproof. It barely holds its shape. But in that moment, It's the most precious umbrella you've ever held. And that night, as you walk home with real rain dancing softly around you, you think about what's changed and what hasn't. Because the weather's the same. Always will be. Clouds roll in. Skies open up. People complain about the forecast even when they secretly love it. But now, there's choice. There's permission. Not just to stay dry, but to be different. To question absurdity. To twirl in the drizzle if you feel like it. Or sit inside with a book and a biscuit if you don't. You pass a teenager scrolling through her phone under a holographic umbrella that projects tiny koi fish swimming above her head. She doesn't look up. She doesn't need to. Because rain isn't a threat anymore. It's part of the scenery. And you're just one more figure beneath the falling sky, humming along with the rhythm, slightly out of tune, but perfectly at peace. You'd think, after all this, the world might move on. That the umbrella uprising would be tucked neatly into history, pressed between pages of trivia like a fern leaf from a school trip. But no. Turns out, umbrellas have legs. Metaphorically. And literally, in one case, a design student from Dundee unveils a prototype walkable umbrella that clips to your waist and trails behind like a jellyfish with attitude. It trips over everything. But still. Innovation. Across Scotland, small businesses lean into the trend with admirable gusto. One laundrette rebrands as Storm and Fold, offering same-day cleaning for soggy trousers and umbrella harmonizing, whatever that means. Bakeries serve cloud-shaped scones. Train stations install umbrella vending machines that also dispense oat bars and polite notes saying, "You've got this." You find yourself consulting Gerald not just for weather, but for life decisions. Raincoat or hoodie? Call your mum or text. Take the longer, scenic route home, or hop the next bus. Gerald doesn't speak, of course. But somehow, he answers. Always. Meanwhile, children born in the early days of the ban's repeal are now old enough to start school. They've never known a Scotland where umbrellas were banned. Their textbooks include units on rainwear rights and civil comfort movements of the 21st century. One textbook illustration shows a cartoon version of you, slightly exaggerated ears and an umbrella that shoots lasers for some reason, beside a timeline of key events. You're somewhere between the Great Legal Shrug and the Geraldian Shift. You frame the page and hang it near the kettle. Because why not? Historians still argue whether this moment in time marks a cultural renaissance or just a glorified fashion fad. Some claim umbrellas symbolize personal sovereignty. Others say it's all just displaced nationalism wrapped in nylon. But outside academia, something gentler is unfolding. Every Sunday, families gather in parks for brolly picnics. Friends swap stories about their first dry kiss or worst wind-related umbrella betrayal. You hear about a particularly vicious gust in Falkirk that flung a tartan umbrella into a duck pond and traumatized 3 toddlers. In Dundee, a local sculptor unveils the Canopy Arch, a public art piece made of hundreds of broken umbrellas welded into a swooping rainbow of ribs and fabric. On rainy days, kids run beneath it squealing. On sunny days, it throws elegant shadows. You go to see it one evening, and a busker nearby sings a haunting tune you've never heard before. Something about standing together under a shared sky. You hum it the whole way home. And yet, not all is peace and ponchos. A new wave of umbrella purists emerges, Canopians. Their manifesto reads like a hipster's dream journal. We reject corporate umbrellas. Mass-produced ribs are ribs without soul. Only hand-stitched raincraft may shield our heads. They host pop-up workshops teaching how to build an umbrella from foraged materials. One man proudly displays his moss and driftwood parasol. It collapses after 10 minutes but earns a standing ovation. A local politician tries to mandate umbrella tax credits for sustainable models, and Twitter explodes. Or rather, X, as it's now called. though no one over 40 has managed to say that name without wincing. You avoid the debates. Instead, you focus on the joy. Like the elderly man who proposes to his partner beneath a glowing umbrella that displays the words "Marry Me" in soft lead script. Or the teenager in your building who teaches his little sister how to walk with an umbrella like a noble Victorian spy. Their laughter echoes in the stairwell like a soft, fizzy memory. One day, while waiting for your bus in a light drizzle, a woman next to you sighs and says, "I remember when we used to just let it soak in. Called it character building." You smile. "Maybe we're building different characters now," you reply. She thinks about it. Then opens her umbrella. It's leopard print. With sequins. You nod approvingly. And somewhere behind you, a small voice says, "Look, Mummy, a rainbow." You turn, expecting the sky to have cracked open in one of those rare, cinematic sunbursts. But no. It's a row of umbrellas: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, lined up along the street. Ordinary people. Ordinary umbrellas. Making magic out of weather. And in that moment, it clicks. The law might have changed. The designs evolved. The culture shifted. But the real victory? It's in the choices we make, every damp morning, to carry a little bit of softness into the world. To shelter ourselves and others, not just from rain, but from the unkindness of forgetting how to care about small things. Like dry socks. Like warm hands. Like the funny little bloom of a stranger's umbrella opening beside yours at just the right moment. There's one last chapter to this soggy little saga, and it doesn't begin with thunder or headlines. It begins in a bookstore. A sleepy nook tucked between a vegan sausage roll shop and a barber shop that only plays 80s synth hits. You're browsing the travel section, not because you plan to go anywhere, but because maps are strangely comforting these days, landscapes you can fold, borders you can control. You thumb through a well-worn book titled Climates of Curiosity, How Weather Shapes Us and Freeze. Chapter 17, The Scottish Umbrella Rebellion and Its Ripple Effects. Your name's in the index. You blink. Flip to the page. And there it is. A paragraph, modest, almost shy, describing you not as a hero or a rebel, but as a catalyst of calm. Someone who questioned the ordinary just enough to invite the absurd. You take a picture with your phone, mostly so you can send it to Isla with the caption, "Told you Gerald had legs." She'll laugh. Or threaten to knit you a matching umbrella hat. Across town, a new monument's being installed in the meadows. You stop by before the scaffolding comes down. It's not grand. Just a life-sized sculpture of an open umbrella, cast in bronze, its fabric caught mid-billow as if in an invisible breeze. On the handle, a plaque reads, "To those who sheltered others, even before it was legal." A pigeon lands on it. Perfect. The ceremony is small. The mayor speaks. A school choir sings an original number called Dry Feet, Full Hearts. It's surprisingly catchy. And then, as the first drops of an afternoon shower begin to fall, people lift their umbrellas in unison, not in defiance, not in fear, but in quiet celebration. Like lighting candles. Like holding hands. Later, as you walk home past the glistening cobblestones, you think about all the things that haven't changed. The buses still run late. The tea's still strong enough to wake the dead. And somewhere, someone's definitely still muttering about back in my day. But then again, umbrellas are everywhere now. Tucked under arms. Shared between lovers. Left at bus stops like tiny, forgotten monuments to kindness. Historians still argue whether this was ever really a movement. Some say it was accidental poetry. Others insist it was a civil rights milestone draped in polyester. One scholar calls it the most British rebellion never to involve tea. But whatever label history assigns, you know what it truly was. A gentle reminder. That even the smallest comfort, withheld long enough, can become a revolution. You pass a window and catch your reflection, older, maybe a little softer around the edges. Gerald's colors are faded now, but he still stands proud above you like a banner of stubborn warmth. You turn the corner and see a group of children playing in the drizzle, swinging their umbrellas like pirate swords and laughing like the rain is applause. You smile. Because, in a way, it is. And now, as the evening hush settles around you, let's leave the clatter of rain behind. You gently fold Gerald, hang him by the door, and step into the quiet rhythm of a home just settling into stillness. The walls hold the memory of laughter, of tea shared on stormy nights, of raindrops tracing lazy lines down window panes. The world, outside, continues to turn, full of umbrellas and noise and motion. But here, in this moment, everything is soft. Safe. You take a breath, long and slow, and let it carry away the weight of the day. No need to rush now. No need to plan. Just the steady hum of the fan, the distant patter of drops on leaves, and your body sinking into stillness, into quiet. The rain, once something to fear, now sounds like a lullaby. Each drop a note in a sleepy song, each breeze a gentle hand smoothing back the worries from your forehead. You are wrapped, not in nylon or law, but in comfort. In the gentle knowledge that you questioned the world once, and the world answered back with color. You don't need to be remembered as anything more than someone who stayed curious. That's enough. Let the night hold you now. Let your thoughts drift, featherlight. And if you dream, dream in rainbows.